Hi, friends. Welcome. It is week 8, not lecture 1, knucklehead. Lecture 2. Sorry about that. Week 1, week 8, lecture 2. Oh, goodness gracious. Those are my marbles. Week 8, lecture 2. May 24th. A couple housekeeping. Discussion questions are due today. Today is the last day you can turn in your discussion questions. So please, please, please make sure you do those. Core assignments due today. Yesterday, I sent out an email, and I just can't catch a break if I'm being plainly honest. I sent out an email. I got a ton of emails immediately, and before I even got an email immediately, I realized that I had said I'm missing one or more things from you, and that was not the intentionality. I just tried to do a copy and paste from an email I'd already sent to the people who I was missing one or more things from. Um, and so if in that email you were confused, as long as you looked at the numbers and as long as you had 14 or more core assignments, and you had 14 or more core assignments and you had 12 or more discussion questions and you had either an orange, a black, a red, or a completion for your belt, then you are good to go. If you had a missing or nothing, and you hadn't already reached out to me, then that is an indication that you do not meet the qualifications to move forward. If you had a completion, even if you didn't take the exam, if you're pending, you still are able more so just to communicate. You're ready to move forward regardless of your belt exam. Um, Regardless of your belt exam result, even if you failed, you still qualify for completion. So you can move forward and you don't have to retake and pay a bunch of money to retake. Um, so there are a couple belt exams that will be finished grading today. But again, everybody is good to go to move forward. I think I don't know that there was anybody that didn't either complete or get a belt exam passing, or if there was, they were already communicated to. But everybody crushed it. You guys did so well. So we'll make sure that we get to finishing that belt exam grading. But again, unless you got an email from me that said I'm missing a belt exam or, hey, warning, you cannot move forward, regardless of what you get on the belt exam, you will be able to move forward and you can go to your next stack. So if that's been a stressor, please know that as long as it said completion, orange, red, or black, you are ready to move forward and everything is A-OK for you. I found out today I had a meeting with our team, and apparently things have changed. And so I have to kind of backtrack on something that we used to do and no longer do. But your next stack, I had stated that on Friday you would have access to your next stack. That has since changed. Why? I'm not sure. If I'm being blatantly honest. You will have access to the Discord of your next stack, but you will not have access to the material because it's now, I guess, been automated. I asked why. I don't understand it, but it's been automated on the system, and so it only opens on the day that your stack starts. I apologize for that miscommunication. I didn't know. I was not aware of that new change that they have implemented. So because of that, I apologize. You will not have access. So next week, you will be able to have just a break week. Now, if you are moving to projects and algorithms, I'm happy to kind of hint at what is next and what you're needing if you're moving to Java. Um, I can just tell you to learn basic things of Java, but without having the information, that'll be a little bit more challenging. Obviously, projects and algorithms, you can move forward a little bit with your project and give you some base things to think through. Like you're gonna have to have CRUD functionality, and you have to have a login and registration if it's Java and or Python, and you don't have to have that with MERN. And as long as you do that with a little bit of CSS, your project will pass. So you can start thinking through that and start building that out. And so just like we talked about in office hour, and as Paul said, if you have this extra week, you can start building out some cooler things and kind of testing and saying, oh, I want to make sure I want to implement this API. So this next week, I'm going to do this API and it's going to be cool. And I'm just going to test it and make sure I'm good. And then once I get my project approved, I'm going to integrate that in. So that's a fun thing. The second thing I wanted to talk about is right now we're ending this stack and there's lots of emotions that often happen with students. First off, you're excited and elated because you're like, oh my gosh, finally, this is a really difficult stack. It's been a rough 8 weeks. I've been sprinting. I'm ready to kind of chill for a little bit, especially you guys have a week that you can just kind of chill for a little bit, which is really awesome. Another thing that happens, especially if you're going into projects and algorithms, is oftentimes what can happen is students get very overwhelmed with feeling like, oh my gosh, I've learned all this coding. Now, sort of the reality of I've got 4 weeks or 5 because of our break week. I have 5 weeks until I'm on my own and I'm looking for a job. And this idea of maybe I'm not a good developer, maybe I'm overwhelmed, and this paralysis and this idea of it's a really common thing. It's called imposter syndrome starts hitting. Um, to where you sit and say, well, I think everybody else is a lot smarter than me, or I don't think I'm actually a good developer. I don't know how to develop. I don't, and all of these things start going through your head. If you find yourself in that space, I just want to communicate that's very normal. It's really hard, and those feelings are there, right? So it's not to minimize those emotions, but that is also a very, very, very normal emotion to have. I get imposter syndrome all the time. Even whenever I'm teaching, I get imposter syndrome because I'm like, if I see an error and I don't immediately know it, I'm like, oh my gosh, am I a fraud? Do I not know? Obviously, I know how to code, right? But I get that. And so it is a common thing known throughout the industry. Imposter syndrome, I would argue everybody that's worked for Coding Dojo from a development side has experienced imposter syndrome. So if you are feeling that, that is a very normal thing. That's not to just brush away or brush aside your imposter syndrome or your feelings, your emotions and stress, but just so you know you're not alone in that. That's a very, very, very common thing. I think Paul and Greg could both attest. Imposter syndrome is something that every developer goes through, whether you're a senior or you are mid-tier or you're a junior. Everybody's got imposter syndrome. Everybody feels like I don't know what I'm doing because this stuff is really, really, really difficult. My encouragement, and I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow when we're going through kind of my tips and tricks for moving forward in a career. My encouragement is to try to break down, especially if you're trying to build a personal project, you're trying to build something, instead of looking at this mountain of things that you need to do, or like, oh my gosh, I have to build this entire full stack application. I don't know how. This is easier said than done, but try to compartmentalize it and break it down and say, okay, what can I do for 10 minutes? Can I build this function? Can I do this algorithm? Can I, do X, Y, or Z? Just do 10 minutes of that. Say, I'm going to turn on a clock. I'm going to put my phone away. I'm not going to look at conspiracy theories on YouTube, or I'm not going to look at Instagram or TikTok. I'm just going to put that away. And I just have 10 minutes of me coding. I'm going to do one algorithm, or I'm going to do one function call, or I'm going to do the registration form. That's it. It's this idea of like building an atomic habit. It's a great book, Atomic Habits. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's a great book. Just taking things piece by piece instead of feeling like it's overwhelming. And I kind of expressed yesterday off camera or off recording that I also deal with this kind of paralysis. If there's a big amount of things that are going on, I freeze and I just can't move forward. That is a normal thing. So if you're feeling that, I just want to say I'm sorry. That is really difficult. We are here to help you. You're not a bad developer. Oftentimes, I try to look back on I encourage students to look back on when you started, what did you know? And where you're at now, how much further along are you? Great example is, and I was telling somebody this example today, was yesterday after class, I went for a run. And I'm training for a marathon. And so I ran and it was pretty challenging. I was like, man, my time wasn't great. But then I ended up looking back at my historical runs and noticing that, my distance has doubled, but my time has stayed the same. And when I look at other people running a marathon, or I look at other people running, it's like, oh man, they're so much faster. But then if I look back on where I've been, it's like, oh, I've made so much progress. Same thing goes with you guys. If you guys are feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling struggled, or you're like, I don't even know that I know React. Think about back to day 1, to week 1, to week 2, when you were just learning about arrow functions, you were just learning about state, and where you are now. And I promise there has been progress, and that'll just be your continual future. In this career, you will be constantly learning. That is a built-in portion of this career. It's a built-in sort of insight and a built-in knowledge that you're going to always have to learn. And so that is very, very common. Any questions on that, imposter syndrome, core assignments, discussion questions, building exams, next stack, anything you have before we jump on to login? Okey-doke. Great, and if you guys ever do feel that, feel free to reach out to one of us and just say, "Hey, this is what I'm feeling. Is this normal? Is this hard?" Et cetera, et cetera. 'Cause, I can probably tell you that, we're not therapists or anything like that, but we can just say, "Hey, you're not alone. I've definitely felt that too." Okay, so just want to recap what we did yesterday, and kind of, well, before that, kind of moving forward, what to expect. Again, today is the last day to turn in anything, unless you had some sort of special assignments or your special conversation with me. Then today's the last day to turn in anything. If you have some weird anomaly, please feel free to reach out to me, and we can kind of work with it. Especially I was talking to my boss yesterday and just kind of let her know about my shortcomings from as an instruction standpoint last week. Transparently, I let her know, hey, I fell short. I was not a very good instructor. And so, A, life happens, but B, because we have this dead week, we do have a little bit of wiggle room if you do need, just a day or two, something like that. It's not as stressful as if you guys were starting on Monday. So if that ever is the case, please feel free to reach out to me. But today's the last day. Tomorrow we will do our end of stack career tips and tricks. I'll probably go on a little bit of a soapbox, just like I did about, hey, be kind to yourself. You are doing a very good job. You are trying to better your life, and that's a very challenging thing. So great job. And kudos to you for sticking through it and continuing to try. So we'll talk about end of stack career tips and tricks, things I wish I would have learned, things I wish I would have known. And then that will be posted here as well. Cool. So that's it. Obviously, this is all bonus material. And so if you do want to go through anything, you'll have access. You will still have access to the MERN stack. So if you wanted to build, like next week, if you wanted to build out some stuff in Socket.io or work on that, you'll still have access. You just want to have access to your next stack. And Jared, I can't believe that I made it. Dude, you crushed it. Everybody crushed it. I was really proud. Like I said, I think there was maybe one student that didn't, that might have a unique situation that we're still working through, but that's it. Everybody else has done very, very well. Lots of belt exams, lots of passing exams, lots of very, very, very good exams. So great job. All of you guys are crushing it. And Brittany, thank you for your kind message. Always here to help and always here to be a resource. Okay. So we're still talking about login and registration. This is class components, like a knucklehead. So we're just finishing. We've done quite a few things, right? We talked about cookies. We implemented our login and log out functionality on our backend, so within our controller. And if I pull up our code here, we go to our controller. We did implement this functionality for login where we said, okay, if we're going to log in, what we first need to do is make sure that the user or the email that they've given us matches a user within our database. So that's what we're doing here. Again, we have to use this await because we can't move forward because this is an asynchronous function. It wants to do things concurrently, but we can't move forward until we know if this is happening. And then once we move forward with that, then we can move forward with, or once we know and have that back, then we can move forward with some of our functionality. What we're saying here is, hey, if from that email that we just gave, if they give us something back, meaning that there is a user that has that, we then go in and use bcrypt. Again, bcrypt's method compare is what it's comparing. We don't know the information. We don't know how the algorithm works. So we use bcrypt to do that. And they're comparing the rec.body password, so the password that we're giving them from our form, to the password that's actually in the dashboard, or sorry, in the database, not the dashboard, in the database. And so if it compares the hash to that, we're saying, hey, if password match, because this is going to give us either true or false, either it matches or it does not. If it matches, then we then create our web token with our ID and our email ID, and then we create our cookie that we call user token, HTTP only true, and then we give this message of success, and we actually give the user back. If there is an issue, we have this status of invalid login attempt, status 400, invalid login attempt, status 400, if we do not find a user that matches this. As a reminder, do we ever want to tell them if, hey, this email is good to go, but the password does not match? Do we ever want to do that? No, how come? You guys can come off mute. We're in week 8, lecture 2.
Because if you tell them they have the right email, then they'll only focus on getting the password.
Absolutely, Alex, right? It just exactly Alex, exactly Jared, exactly Brittany. Because then they just go, cool, now let's just hammer however many passwords we can and just try to break this and break into their account. So you always keep it super vague. Invalid login attempt or invalid email and or password is not correct. You know, I think that's one that is commonly used. Excuse me. And then lastly, we have our log out, which is just super simple. Really just log out right here. Super duper easy. All we do is clear our cookie and then we send a status 200. Everything is good to go. So now what we need to do is build out the functionality on our front end. So we have a reg log form, and this has our form. We're able to register. We were able to see that yesterday. But now we need to build out 2 things. We need to build out the login form. And then secondly, we need to build out the log out functionality. And so we will build that out right now. So I've got this. So I'm going to change a few things. Now I can have this all as one form. And this is what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it all as one component. You could modularize it out if you wanted to and have multiple components. So you could have a registration component and a login component. And then I want to put them side by side. I could do that if I wanted to. I'm not going to for right now, but you could, right? You could take this code and do that. I am going to now say, because I'm going to build in my login form. I'm going to say login form. And so I've got this call medium for this form, got a submit handler, but I'm going to have to change this here in a second because that is not going to work correctly. But let's go ahead and see what our good old friend at Copilot wants us to do. I'm going to close this. Oh, golly, there we go. Okay. So we've got our email address and password, input type, password, form control. I don't know why Dave is not working. There we go. Perfect. And then lastly, I need a button that is login, class type, submit button. I'll do info. Perfect. I'm going to do offset to 5. Well, if this is offset, if this is 4, make this 5 actually. Offset 1, we'll make this 5. Offset, that's 6. 7. Let's try this. Okay. So can anybody see immediately what error I might run into if I try to do it this way? So I've got my form. Well, I got to close my form. That's one immediate error. Okay. So I've got my form. Can anybody see what it might be? About to run out of columns. Oh, that's a great point. There we go. So let's see. First off, how many columns do I have? I've got 5. Offset of 7. So that should put me at the very end. And then here I've got 5, 6. So that's 6. Yeah, so this is going to be an issue, right? So let's just see where it goes. And then we can kind of build this out. So we'll do column medium 5 and see kind of how this goes. Now I did put this in a row, class name row, so they should be side by side. But that's one issue. What other issue could I have here in just a second? Yeah, exactly, Philip. The submit handler is built for our new user, right? It is going to this axios.post, and we are passing some user info, right? And then we're passing with credentials because we're dealing with cookies, whether we are passing cookies or we were accepting cookies, you have to have this with credentials true. And we're handling this for just a new user. I don't want to do a new user. I don't want to create a new user. So there's a couple things that I need to do, right? Not only is my submit handler going to be incorrect, can anybody think of what else would be incorrect within this form? One more thing.
The password, the on
The
change.
password should be fine. The on change, right? Because this is doing my change handler. My change handler is setting user info. My user info has all of this information, right? So I don't need that. I don't need a confirm password. I don't need a last name, first name. I don't need all that information. So what I can do is I could do something like const, let's say login info. You set state where I've got email and password. Perfect. But if I'm going to do that, then I need a const log change handler, right? Because I only want to keep track of my login information. And then secondly, I need something for my submit handler, right? So I'm going to keep my submit handlers kind of the same, kind of in the same space. So say const, login handler, prevent default. I'm still making an axios.post request. I'm going, instead of my API register, I'm going to log in, right? And we'll just check that here in a second. If everything is good to go, I have this and I am console logging the res.data, and then I'll navigate to my dashboard, or there will be an error. Perfect. So just to clarify, if we are dealing with our register, we want to make sure that we have a handler that just handles this register. And this is why it might make sense if we had this as two different components, right? Because now you can see, okay, we're dealing with handlers and they're changing and stuff like that by having two components, and then you just morph them together. That might make more sense. Right now we already have it built, so we don't need to, we're not going to modularize it out, but this would be a great argument for why this would be in two components instead of one, or having just a component for registration form, and you have a login form, and then maybe you have another page or a component that brings both of those in together, and this is reg and log form sort of thing. But let's go in and change. So this is going to be our login handler. Perfect. Nope. I don't know, login handler. What do we call it? Oh yeah, login handler. And then this is log change handler. And I changed the wrong one. Perfect. Login handler. And this will be the log. Perfect. Cool. So now we should be able to pass our email address and password to our axios.post. Let's go make sure that this route is correct. Remember, Copilot wrote it for us, and Copilot's dope, but sometimes it is not dope. Let's go make sure that we have an API/login. We do. It runs our login controller, and we know that we need a rec.body.email. We're giving that, and we need a rec.body.password. Oops, right here, rec.body.email, rec.body.password. Okay, we're good to go. We should pass that correct information over. And so now let's just spin this up. So if I say node mon server.js, perfect, we're connected, everything's good there. And say npm start. I'm going to create a new user. False. I'm not going to create a new user. What's wrong with my log reg? I always forget my change handlers. I always forget the extra curly. So that's how I knew it was going to be that. Okay, so it shows this is right here, right? So let's move this a little bit. Let's make this a little bit. Let's make this look a little bit nicer. So I'm going to say medium 6. Doesn't look really any bigger. Maybe a little bit. Now let's do a H1 within this. I think within my form, I can do an H1. Registration form. Cool. And then we'll do a login just above. Perfect. So now we can see, okay, so we got a registration and login. Now, if I were to Philip, oops, not LLIPP, Wagner, p@w.com. Perfect. If I register, cool, it takes me to my dashboard. Now, oh, NordPass wants to save that. If I come back here and have this, now if I say p@w.com and then I type in the password, I get into my dashboard as well. So that shows us that our logic works, right? We are able to log in and register. We were able to, let's see, I think we are, yep. So we're good to go. We were able to establish a connection and we're able to dive into our database. And let's say that we wanted to, if we wanted to, we could have console logged the user or the cookie or anything like that. But this is all good to go, right? This is exactly what we want to do. This is exactly what we are needing here. Cool. Any questions on implementing the login form and maybe some differences? Some thoughts? Okay. Now the only things we could do, not the only things, but something we could do is we could do like a log out. How would you do a log out here? What would you guys do? If I want to log out, what is the functionality I could do to maybe get me back to my registration form? Somebody be my guide, my Sherpa, my code Sherpa. Ooh, that's a good name for like a YouTube channel. An on-click? Okay. So Josie, how would you do this? Yeah, I think this is a great idea. So what would we do? Somebody walk me through the code. Somebody actually code it with me. Yeah, Josie, exactly. I'm gonna link it to a function, but what would I add? What would I do? Anybody want to come off mute? Somebody literally tell me what to type and how to build this out. Anybody want to help? My wife will kill me, but I'll call on somebody. Anybody want to tell me how I can do this? Well, all I want to do is I want to create a log out. I can do a button. I can do whatever we want.
Yeah, we can probably do a button, and then in the back end we could do, what is it, log out, request,
Yeah,
results, and then
yeah.
clear the cookie.
Okay, so tell me, Alex, what are we gonna do here?
We're
So
gonna
we create a button.
do, yeah, we're gonna do a button.
Okay. So I'm gonna do a button. Oops.
Hey, Cameron. How are
Okay.
you?
And then we're gonna put log out there.
Okay, perfect. Log out. Cool. And then what are we gonna do? We've got this functionality of logout, right? In my backend. In fact, I even have a route. Oops, sorry. I even have a route for API/logout.
Mhm.
And so what I can do is in here, I've got this button that says log out. And if I look, if I go back to localhost 3000, we've got this log out just kind of sitting in the middle right now. I could say maybe just put in the top right. Perfect. I have this API, right? Or I have this route that I can call with my API. So what if I did something like an on click? I think that was a great idea. Josie and Tony, I think we can do that exact thing, right? Where I can create some sort of functionality that I'm going to say const logout handler. And all it does is it does an Axios post request to API logout. Again, I've got cookies, so I need to pass with credentials as true. And then all I'm going to do is if the response is good to go, I'm going to navigate back to this empty. This is where my registration form is, right? Because that's what the route for just to get back to the form. So I want to log out and I want to take them back to the front. Perfect. Just close that up. And then I just have my dot catch if there's an error, right? So I've got this logout handler, and all I have to say is on click. I want to run the logout handler. Perfect. That's all I have to do, right? I'm just saying, great. I want to keep this information. I want to do this. I want to, and all it's going to do is it's going to make this request to this guy in my backend. And it's going to say, cool, this is a post request to log out. Great, go do log out. It's going to come here, and all logout's going to do is say, okay, cool, let's run clear cookie. It's going to clear our user token cookie, return a status. We're not doing anything with the status right now. That's okay. We can console log the data if we wanted. But then we're navigating back home. So whenever we log out, it should just navigate back to where we're going. So we also want, actually, in all seriousness, we actually don't want that here, right? We don't want it in this guy. We want it in our dashboard. Because we wouldn't, if we're on that page, we're not going to be logged in, right? Let's bring it up here. Perfect. So I need to import Axios and use navigate. I'm going to do that. I have to say const navigate is use navigate. Perfect. And then I also need to take that beautiful little button and I need to put that in here. So what you could in theory do is really just create like a nav bar component, right? And just put that in there. So maybe if you wanted to be able to click and go back home or do whatever, you would have that where log out is also there. But for right now, we're a-okay. We're just doing what we're doing. We'll have this button. That's all it says. And then it'll say I'll call it a P tag in the dashboard. Okay. So if I log in, perfect. I'm in the dashboard. I click log out. Click log out. Cool. I had to double click because it got off of that. But then it takes me back here, right? And even more importantly, if I say pw.com, that's the password. Right now, if I inspect, if I go to my application, don't have anything, username. So this should clear, and alas, it is not. Even though Username localhost.
Can you test it just by trying to go to local 3000/dashboard?
Yeah, we don't have anything that says anything like that. Oops, I never spelled that. I never spelled dashboard correct.
So
We
it's
don't
not
have anything. Yeah, so it's not clearing my cookies. Let's go back to the platform and see what the heck's going on. Should have log in, log out. Clear cookie. That's all. XGS post, XGS post, XGS post.
Do you get the
Notice I didn't
Or-
do that guy right there. So let's go try that. I don't know if I have to pass something. Let's go try this. Yeah, that was it. So if I say p@w.com, password, I get this, right? I get this cookie, this guy, and I log out, and then it goes away. Oh, I guess it was that top one. Okay, so it looks like we also, whenever we are dealing with logout, you also have to pass in just this empty object. Wonder why we would need to pass in that empty object. That's something we can investigate later.
I think it's because it's a post, like it's expecting some kind of parameters.
Expecting some sort of something. Yeah. Okay, but regardless, we were able to see that we can log out, right? And so now we can do certain things. Now, what we can try to test is the last thing is do this authorization in middleware. So we've already done this authorization in middleware. Right, we've already built this, but we can try to do this authenticate and say, okay, only if they have created something can everything work. So let's do we don't have, I guess we don't have anything that can even do that because we don't have something we can grab to authenticate, right, from the front end. What I'm thinking out loud, and I'm thinking out loud here is what I wanted to try to do is I want to, in my route, say, okay, you can only go to this route, or you can only do this if you're authenticated, if you have a cookie, right? If you have this token, but nothing here really has that unless I were to, I guess I can just build something real fast. App.get API users, find all users. We'll just do this. And then let's say that in my controller, I had a get all users. Again, you wouldn't really like do this, but we're just trying to show you the middleware portion of this. You do good, yeah. What we need. Cool. So let's say I wanted to be able to get all users and show them, right? And I was able to do that. And then we're just going to create a button that's going to try to call this Axios get all users, but unless we're authenticated, we can't do that. Okay. And then, so let's go into my front end. And that's in my dashboard. I'm going to create another little sort of something. We say another button. BTN primary. And we're going to say get all users. Perfect. Okay. And what this is going to do is it's going to say const. We're going to say get all users, you prevent default, Axios, get all users. Perfect. It is insane what Copilot can just so quickly pick up on. Okay. Great. So that's all we're doing. Obviously, we're not trying to do this. All I'm trying to show is that we're going to try to run this without being authenticated, and it should give us an error, and it shows what our middleware can do, right? So I'm going to say on click. I want to get all users. Perfect. So when we click this, we should try to run this get all users method, but we will not be logged in, meaning that if we come to our route and before we do anything, just coming straight from the platform, we have this comma authenticate. That should authenticate and say, are they authenticated? Can they do this? And if they're not, then they can't do that. So let's do that. Let's come here. So sorry, not on that logout, but let's say authenticate, comma, perfect. And then we should, I don't think we have to bring in, oh yeah. So I do need to bring in authenticate for my web token. So let's do that up here. Const authenticate require. So this allows me to actually use this method from my middleware. And again, this is all coming from this config JWT, this guy, right? In order for it to run. Okay. So now that that's built, let's test it and see what the heck is going on. So we come here and we go to /dashboard. We see that we don't have a token, right? But if I click this, let's see, we get an error. And it says Axios error, request failed with status code 401, bad request, right? Request failed with status code 401. And so that tells us, okay, we are good to go. We are unauthorized. You cannot do this. You do not have access. Now, let's just go log out. If I go to PNW, you go to password, and then I do success. I don't remember what my code says it's going to do. It's going to return that, and then my front end, whenever I call that, is going to console log data. Yeah, it's fine. Then what I can do is now that I have that, now that I have a token here, I should be able to get an array of 12 users. I now have all my users. So we can see that this middleware works perfectly fine. Works just like we thought. Only if the user is logged in and only if they have this user token can we actually run that. But we saw that when they did not have that, we got that error of, nope, sorry, you are unauthorized. You cannot get there. You do not have access to that. So our middleware works perfectly fine. Okay, any questions on that? Any questions in general? That is all I have for auth, login, registration, all of that good stuff. Any questions?
How would have you prevented somebody to go to the page without being authenticated in the first place?
From the, like,
Just from the
how would you go
URL,
to-
typing in URL dashboard. If they're not logged in, can you stop them from going to that page and seeing anything?
that would be front end. That would be some front end stuff because the back end is just, can you retrieve this database or not? And that's
Mhm.
what that middleware is doing. You could do some, like, basically if you, I don't know, Tony, did you take Python?
Yeah,
Yeah, so basically you could just do a check in the same way that I think in Python you did, like, if user's not in session, then when they're trying to navigate to it, it doesn't work.
yeah.
Same sort of thing. You would check and say, like, hey, if there's not a cookie, when this request is happening, you can have some sort of functionality in your, you would have some sort of functionality that basically checks when they are coming here in this route. Basically, are they good to go? And if so, go ahead and do this. And if not, then do not do that. So
Well,
that way
thanks,
they
Will.
try to prevent.
Now I'm gonna have to rewatch all the Python videos.
Well, you can just see, right? Like you can just so let me we can even
No,
I
I'm
don't know off
just
the top
kidding.
of my
I'm
head.
I'm kidding. But I have forgotten a lot of Python already.
Someone not logged in from accessing a dashboard. So let's try two things, just as we got 12 minutes left. So you can try Stack Overflow and see if there is anything here. So we could say if current user, then we pass in this component. So this is a little bit more advanced, where you can, in your route, actually add in some different things. So this is using a state manager. And so basically if they're in, and you can do ternaries. So basically if they're logged in,
Yeah.
then you show this. And if not, then you show sign in. That's great. And then I wonder if I were to do this, let's ask the godfather of chat, OpenAI. My wife used it. My wife and I share it. She asked a bunch of law questions. Yep. Okay. Let's see if old chat will do this. Yeah.
Redirect.
Yep. So it's got a basically is logged in. So we'd have some sort of functionality to tell if they're logged in. And then we can this one has a switch. So basically either do this or do that.
And the other one was just using like a ternary statement.
Yeah, the other one just used a ternary statement. Now it had some sort of like global state. So if they're logged in, then that state, not even global, but you think of it even like lifted state, right? So maybe when they log in, and this could be a really simple way, kind of a dummy, not a dummy, but like a really simple way to do it is if I have some sort of like const is logged in, set is logged in if it's false, and then basically have some sort of route in here, some sort of, if is logged in, then this, else ternary, go to the reglog form. So let's look at this. Let's see if we can quickly implement it based off of the two things that we had. So it looks like all we do is, it's pretty simple. We just go send the route. Well, that's browser and then router. Yeah, so we just do this and then is logged in, route, dashboard, or you go to reglogs form. And so then what we would have to do basically is, this is cool because I haven't even looked into this, so this is great. Because then what we would do is we would have to pass in, right? This set is logged in as an element in our route, or we would pass in that as state. And then so now whenever it would depend on like a global state manager. So maybe just is logged in is only good for one user, but basically whenever they register, we would also update this state to true. And so then as they're going and as there's a cookie, we make sure that it's true and then cool, they're logged in. But the minute they do log out, we also set is logged in to false, right? So we would, that's lifted state, we'd set it to false. And then now if they try to go back to dashboard, they would get redirected to the actual platform itself or to the reglog form.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I'll keep both in here for you so that way you can see both. I'll just keep it as like that. Yeah, pretty sweet. All right, anybody else have anything else they want to talk about? The only thing I wanted just to introduce you to, we obviously don't have time. I would just encourage you to do this though, is in, and just to let you know that there's another way to do things, is in this advanced MERN, there is this tool or these things. It's talking about classes. If you've ever dealt with OOP, it's object-oriented programming, then you're familiar with OOP. I would encourage you to learn the 4 pillars of OOP. The reason is because especially when it comes to interviews, this is a common thing to ask and to see if people know the 4 pillars of OOP, especially bootcamp grads. It's encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. That you can really just Google OOP and understand kind of what's going on here. From a high level, it's just dealing with classes and the kind of operations of how a class can work and sort of some of the fundamental things of a class. So I would really highly suggest you at least have an understanding of OOP. You have an understanding of the 4 pillars. And if somebody were to say, what is polymorphism? Or if they were to say, hey, I've got a class of a vehicle, and I've got a class of a truck that extends a vehicle, meaning that it's got some of the main components. But when it comes to, you know, both vehicles have a method that is driving on dirt and it's by default false, but if I have a truck, it's true, or, you know, the way it operates is different. Which pillar is that an example of? Understanding just kind of that, hey, that's polymorphism, because you can have the same method and it can change, and having an understanding would be important there. So I would just at least give this a look through. If you've never dealt with OOP or classes, I would definitely give this a look through. And then the other thing with that is we have been doing everything in React as functional components, right? And that's because that's what React now is in. That's how it all operates. These are all functions, right? These are just arrow functions. These are what we call a functional component. Now, back in the day, when React was first created, it actually used something called class components. And so you have to talk about classes and OOP before we get into this. We can't really just dive into class components. But I did just want to show you that there is another way to write components, and it's classes. I would also give this, here's what I would say as a caveat. If React is something you're interested in working in, and you're like, I really love this language, I would consider learning about class components. If you're like, hey, React was cool, but it can kick rocks, I don't ever want to have a job in React. Okay, maybe if you have some time next week and you wanted just to learn something, you can. But if you really want to learn React, or if you want to work in React, I would really focus on learning how class components operate and how props, because it handles props differently and synthetic events and state differently. And the whole reason I mention this is because some jobs still use class components. An example is last stack. I had a student who got a React job before the stack even ended. I taught, I think it was week 7, I taught on class components. And that day, they had started their first day of work and they got into the code and it was all class components. And they're like, oh no, I have no idea how to do this. And I taught on it. So that is in one of the archived lectures as well. So if you're interested, I did teach on class components last stack, week 7. So I think just go to the archived ones and it's week 7, lecture 1, I believe. But then they were like, oh, great. My entire company uses classes and not functions. So I just want you to know there is multiple ways. So if you do want to do React, I would become familiar because you might get into a company that still uses class component. And again, just very simple stuff, but the way they do lifecycle methods, which is kind of handled by itself in functional components, but you have to do a couple different things with it, or the way they handle props or children or state. I would just become familiar with it. Again, if you are wanting to jump into React and do this as a job. So that's something I would encourage you for next week to go through if you can. Other than that, friends, go ahead.
Yeah, so on that, would you say it's accurate that, like, even though we should focus on learning both, would it be accurate to say that if one company is focusing on classes, they're not going to be, is going to be hyper focused on that and not really incorporate many functions, or do they still both get used?
You would, they would have a breakdown of like we use class components, because it inherently they don't operate the same. So like even the way they do state, right? So you have like these constructors, and then the way they handle state is just wildly different. And so here you've got like a this dot state, and this is how like
Right.
state is, and so you wouldn't intertwine both with them. So you would
Mhm.
have like either classes or functional components, just because there's a lot of stuff that is different in how they operate and change that isn't quite interchangeable.
Hmm.
So
Thank you.
yeah, it's interesting. Definitely something to learn. And again, I do a lecture last stack. I did a lecture week 7 on this. So if you guys are interested in just a lecture, I talk about a lot of this stuff, lifestyle, cycles. We talked about mounting components, which is when it enters the virtual DOM. So it kind of talks about how when we're updating and stuff. So I talk all about that. But yeah, it's an interesting read. Again, if you're interested in going into React, this is definitely something I would say familiarize yourself with this. Because though React moving forward is functional components, it's hard to switch over an entire code base, right? And it takes a long time. And so a lot of companies still might be on this sort of antiquated, it's only like less than a decade, but antiquated code. So something to be aware of. And then with that, my friends, right on the dot, it just turned to 6 p.m. As I looked at it, our last official informational class is over. Give yourselves a hand. You guys crushed it. You guys have been one of my favorite classes I've ever had at Coding Dojo. Tomorrow, again, I will be going over, we'll be talking shop, but we'll also talk about end of stack careers, tips and tricks. So it's not doing any coding. I will just tell you, here's things I wish I would have known. Here's things I wish, that you can take into this, but it's no coding. So you guys are officially done with all the coding. Great job. You guys have been amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do in the future. Other than that, friends, I hope you have a wonderful night, and that's all I have.